Hello and good morning, everybody. I am hugely delighted to have Craig Houston with us today. He's the guy who broke the story on YouTube about Kier Starmer and the suspicions relating to the alleged arsonist. George Galloway has done a video on it last night, adding a lot more detail, and I will be getting Craig's reaction to that. But in the meantime, I'd just like to thank Craig for coming on. All of his links are in the description. His YouTube, his X. So please go and support his important work. He's supporting the Marines and doing some great stuff. So, Craig, what got you interested in this story? How did it come on your radar?
X. I saw some people posting about it in X, and the thing that actually drove me to do something about it was the vacuum and the void created by the pure lack of information available. The fact that Kier Starmer, the government, Labour, said very little. I think the government made some comment on it at the time before the arrests, and there's just nothing. And it reminded me of the early Rudakabana Southport story when we were, the narrative was very, very peculiar. So that got my spidey senses interested in it, and information came my way about apparently, alleged things about the guy who was later arrested, and suggestions made to me about potential other property. Because the thing that was peculiar when I started looking into it was mainstream coverage talking about this connected property. And you think, well, why are you using words like that? What, is it owned by him? I think not, because if it was, it would just be described as another property owned by Kier Starmer, like the one that we know was his, because him and his wife have been outside the property clapping the nurses through COVID. So it's when you see strange reporting like that, it gets my spidey senses tickling. And I thought, well, there's more behind this. There's something peculiar going on. So that's kind of how I started.
Yeah, and I'd just like to state that, it is just a rumor that this guy's occupation is a male escort, or AKA a rent boy, referencing, a young person that's in that professional capacity. And but George Galloway did add several details about that, which we will get to. And have you found anything else out overnight, Craig?
Nothing concrete, but I alluded to it in the video that there's been a suggestion, and again, we don't know the truth. So anything is pure speculation at this point. But there are a growing number of people suggesting that this connected property or property connected to Starmer may be owned by the infamous Lord Ali. And he's a strange character, because I've not had a single man ever buy me a suit or a watch or anything like that. So I think to do so that's peculiar to start with. And then when you factor in that Lord Ali was voted, before anybody had heard of him, as Stonewall's politician of the decade. Now, Stonewall are obviously famous for getting gay rights, etc. The guy is, an open homosexual, which is, we're at 2025 now. That's not really a big thing. But to become Stonewall's politician of the decade when nobody's heard of you, what have you been doing? And Stonewall have been very much behind the advancement of or pushing for transgender rights recently, since they had a successful battle for gay rights. They then swung their guns on the transgender issue. So nobody knows what he done, but he seemed to impress them. So when you throw his name into the mix, it just gets potentially very sordid, and people are guessing this and guessing that. And the easy way to debunk all of these things is come and talk about it, fill the void.
Yeah, when the mainstream media are in lockstep, silence like they are right now, it's very suspicious indeed.
Yeah.
So, irrespective of his occupation, how does he know to target all these properties associated with Kier Starmer? That's the big question, isn't it?
Well, 100%, and very much a massive question, because could you or I, and we have loads of people, you more than me, with the reach you've got, people who come to you with information regularly, I would imagine. You'll have a lot of sources and contacts, and you probably couldn't find out, Kier Starmer's address, this other property that's connected to him, and a vehicle that was once registered to it. So who would? And I would suggest there's only two types of people would. That's people with scary connections, and underworld or in state governments, or people who know him personally. That's it. That's kind of it. There's probably very good journalists out there that couldn't have found the connections to Kier Starmer, to the motor car or the second property. So again, and this guy, whether you love Starmer or loathe Starmer, Starmer is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It is a massive job with massive security risk consequences. So how did this guy know? It's bizarre. It's totally bonkers that, it's got to be one of those two things. There might be a third that I'm just not clever enough to find, but the only two possible reasons why somebody would know so much about the Prime Minister. And to get as far as petrol bombing them and set them on fire, and nobody's really that bothered about it, is completely insane.
Now, looking at the car that was targeted, he no longer owns that. He sold it to a neighbor, so it was still in the same vicinity. And I think it was sold a couple of years ago, which means that this person then who attacked the car would perhaps allegedly have associated the car with Kier Starmer a couple of years ago, which would put him in his late teens, which makes the story even more salacious.
I see where you're going there, Shaun, and that's a big consideration. And the other, because we've got this unknown property as well, then how does the whole thing fit? I mean, you've got this speculation about the property being owned by Ali. That just throws another bit of timber on the fire here.
It does indeed. And viewers, I mean, people are putting lots of comments in the chat right now, hypothesizing, some of them, that it might have been a honey trap. What do you think about that?
And again, that's a risk to our security as a nation. This man's the Prime Minister. Can you imagine if somebody had put attempted petrol bomb Trump Towers or any address associated to Donald Trump or any other world leader of any size and scale at all, anywhere in the world? We would know everything about it. And Galloway mentioned on his video about it, you would see the newspapers full of photographs, background, interviews with the bloody teachers that he had. That's the level this would be at if this was any other world leader, bar ours.
Do you know anything about the second arsonist that was arrested?
No, and again, it's very peculiar, isn't it? The only thing we have is an age. I don't even know if we've got a confirmed sex of the second arsonist that's been arrested. But again, it's happened in one of the biggest airports in the world. Again, connected to one of the top 10 world leaders, and by occupation, not by performance or ability, I may add. And it's like, let's not talk about it. It is absolutely bonkers. And anybody with half a brain's got to smell a rat here and know that there's a reason we're not getting this information, and the only thing we can consider is it's because it's damning to Kier Starmer. But we need to keep going back to the facts. This man is a Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. It's a massive interest and concern for anybody with half a brain in their head. They want to know, because the security of our country, it could, hey, for all we know, this guy could be a link to Russia through some sort of cell or whatever. We don't know, but somebody does. So why are we not? Why are we? If he's not that serious, then you would kind of like to ease the concerns of the public, and even more reason to tell us. And the fact they're not telling us just gets more smelly as every hour goes by.
Right, I'm just going to read this article then about the second arsonist, and I'll get your thoughts on it. So it says here, police made second arrest over Kier Starmer arson attacks, swooping on a suspect 26 at Luton Airport. These attacks have targeted the Prime Minister. The 26-year-old was arrested around 1:45 p.m. on Saturday at London Luton Airport on suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson with intent to endanger life. The arrest was made by counter-terrorism officers from the Eastern Region Special Operations Unit. The man has been taken into police custody in London. So they have said it's a man now. The arrest relates to 3 incidents: a vehicle fire in Northwest 5 on NW5 on 8th of May, a fire at the entrance of property in North 7 on 11th of May, fire at a residential address in NW5 in the early hours of 12th of May. This arrest follows the arrest of 21-year-old Roman of Sydenham on Thursday, who appeared in court charged with 3 counts of arson with intent to endanger life. It is understood that the 3 arson targets were the Prime Minister's £2 million North London property, which was set alight on Monday night, just days after the torching of a car and a flat, which the Prime Minister had previously owned. Met Police are saying all 3 targets of the arson attacks have previous connections with a high-profile public figure. Officers from the Met's Counter-Terrorism Command are leading the investigation. And Kier has let the 4-bedroom house in Kentish Town to his sister-in-law on a peppercorn rent since he moved into Downing Street last year. The blaze damaged the porch of the property, but firefighters were able to bring it under control within 20 minutes, stopping it from spreading further indoors. The doors of 2 homes linked to the Prime Minister in North London both suffered fire damage within 24 hours of each other. This came after a Toyota RAV4 on Sir Kier Street burst into flames on VE Day. The owner of the vehicle, a neighbour of the Prime Minister, is understood to have thought that the fire started because of a faulty battery. The hybrid car was completely destroyed. Sadiq Khan said the 3 fires have left the Prime Minister's family feeling frightened for their safety. He told LBC Radio, "Don't underestimate the ripples of fear that his wife and the kids felt when they will have to read this stuff in the paper. But for the grace of God, they are safe, thankfully, in Downing Street. They've got a good protection team. Anyone with information is asked to call the police." And then it gives an information number. So there's the latest details, Craig. Any thoughts on those?
Again, there's more questions than answers. And we live in a society today, whether it's good or bad, I'm not sure, where we want instant information due to the growth of social media. And unfortunately, I know people in the press, I know a number of journalists, they tend to be sports journalists, oddly enough, because of a previous life I had 10 years ago. And they've always told me that investigative journalism is dead as far as newspapers are concerned, because they don't sell papers anymore and everything's online, incomes are down. So they don't have time to, an editor tell a journalist, you can go away and spend 2 days or 2 weeks on that story and build one story over that term. So we don't have those opportunities anymore. For people slaughter the mainstream for having no investigative journalists, and that's why we don't. If we still bought newspapers, we could probably still justify them. So we've got this hunger for information, and people like yourself and myself try. We sort of fill that void a little bit, and the public just want to know. And when you hear things like that, where again there's no really any answers there, people are now asking questions. Well, who's this 27-year-old? Where's he from? Is he Ukrainian? Is he potentially a male model? And all these questions come again, where for days in now, the public should be able to know a lot more than we have just now.
Right, so we'll play Galloway then and get the extra details he provided, and I'll get your thoughts. And he did start out with a disclaimer that it is abominable that anyone's house has suffered like this, and he doesn't wish harm to come to anyone. And I'd just like to reiterate that as well. From this channel, we don't wish harm upon anyone, and we want to get to the bottom of what's happened here. So let's see what George says, and then I'll pause it and I'll get your thoughts.
Quite quickly, the British police apprehended a 21-year-old Ukrainian from Sydenham. Now, Sydenham is a very long way in the south of London from the properties which were all in the north of London. It's not clear, because we haven't been told, how the police managed so swiftly to trace the arsonist. And the attempt to create fire, to endanger life and property, is a serious offense. And I'm going to try very hard not to stand on any legal eggshells that might be problematic for the prosecution of the case. The last thing, of course, we would like to do is adversely affect the course of justice by probing too deeply into the arson that now on social media practically everybody is talking about. I asked the following question on Twitter, and 1 million people viewed it in 21.5 hours. My question was this: how did a 21-year-old Ukrainian male model, for that is what he turned out to be, know the location of former properties of the Prime Minister Kier Starmer and current properties owned but not occupied by Kier Starmer?
There's only two options, isn't there, really? Either the kid had visited and knew these locations in the car, or he'd been fed intelligence. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I can't see a third option. There may very well be one, but it would, the common sense and logical answer to that is, yeah, you have to be either intelligence or fed intelligence, or stuff that you know through your own private dealings with these people. So, I get that. I don't know what one's scarier, if I'm perfectly honest.
Well, we know Starmer loves all things Ukrainian, so it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
And a motor car formerly owned by Kier Starmer. How could a 21-year-old with, by all accounts, little command of the English language, how could he have known where to find these properties and this motor car? And why would he want to set them on fire? Why would he want to commit the serious offense of arson to the endangerment of life, which, if convicted, will see him in prison for many years? These are legitimate questions, and they would normally, in normal circumstances, if Britain had journalists, if Britain had broadcasters, if Britain had the kind of journalists that even in the 1960s, during the Profumo scandal, never mind in the 1970s, in the era of World in Action, in the era of the Insight team in the Sunday Times, or even at the low end of the market, Neville Beck, of not so fond memory, of the not so fondly remembered News of the World. In normal times, when we had normal journalists, we would today know all about this.
I'd like to say that we've got Craig Houston on the screen, who was the first person to put it on YouTube, folks, and his link is in the top of the description box for his channel and his X. So please subscribe, and he's doing a lot of great stuff, campaigning for the Marines and going against the government policies that are just absolutely insane. But let's keep going with this for now before we bring Craig back in.
This 21-year-old Ukrainian male model, we'd have had pictures of him in his underpants. Actually, oh wait, we have more or less pictures of him in his underpants. Now, when I say male model, I'm not necessarily talking euphemistically. He may well have been a male model, but starting out in his career as a male model, he advertised himself as a male model at the extraordinary low rate of £20 per hour. Moreover, he was ready for the first photo shoot to give the first hour for free.
Craig, where do you think Galloway got that information from? The £20 an hour stuff?
I don't know. I must have missed that, but it's an incredible piece of information and a big thing to say. Listen, love George Galloway or loathe George Galloway. One thing George Galloway isn't is stupid. So he knows by making claims that can't be stood up would put him in a dangerous position, and I don't think he would be joining in any rumours if he didn't have something to back it up. So fair play to him.
Yeah, he definitely would be protecting his arse on this one. I'll keep playing it. I'm just going to mute it because there's a bit of feedback.
House of words.
So this was a young man of great entrepreneurial spirit. No doubt he was determined to break into the world of male models. Now, the cynical amongst you might be imagining that the man that is under arrest was ready to offer other services. And you would be right. He also advertised himself as a roofer. He was ready to fix your roof. I don't know, maybe fix your back door at the same time as fixing your roof. But I have no evidence that he was, as is being widely now reported, a rent boy. And even if he was a rent boy, that does not necessarily link him to the Prime Minister, Kier Starmer, at all. I've told you many times, but let me say it again, to clear up any misapprehension that there might be. I don't know or care anything about the sexuality of the victim of these crimes. And it's not relevant what the sexuality of the victim of these crimes is. I don't know if Kier Starmer prefers men or women, and I don't care. I don't care whether he's a top or a bottom. I don't care if he's active or passive. I don't know, and I don't care. But if our Prime Minister is at risk, either from terrorist attack or from a blackmailer, then I believe that we must be told. We must be told if our Prime Minister was the victim of arson attacks mounted by a foreign national on behalf of a foreign power. Or
what doesn't make any sense is that, you know, the kid, if he's Ukrainian and he's pro Starmer because Starmer's supplying Ukraine, then why would he be going against Starmer if Starmer's accommodating Ukraine? Would that just eliminate the intelligence side of it and suggest the other side of it is more likely? What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I've just stuck some earphones in, mate, because I think it was getting a bit of feedback here. That solved the problem. Yeah, again, it's just totally bizarre, and I think as a citizen of the United Kingdom, I would prefer it not to be an intelligence-led campaign. The other thing is, I don't know how successful it was. I think it sort of bumped a porch, and if it was a terror campaign, I think it would probably be more significant an attack and probably more successful. However, there's one thing to consider. We have now got 2 arrests. That's a bit odd. But if it turned out that the second person arrested had similar extracurricular activities to the first one, I would actually be more comfortable with that, because it's not then terror related. That's the big fear for me as a citizen, is that it could be terror related. And I would severely hope it isn't. So the other option, that he knows him through personal contact, would actually be more pleasing for me. But then, if he's putting himself in these situations, that's probably a risk to our establishment. So it could potentially look at his downfall. I mean, you look at the Portillo things back in the day. These things led to the fall of very important people, and this could. The best thing for Starmer would be if it was some sort of terrorist plot, because then he's just a victim. If he's helped bring this on himself, that's a whole different can of worms.
So you're saying that it's safer for the country if it's a lover's spat?
Very much so. But
Right,
not so good for Mr. Starmer.
Let's see what George continues to say.
or a foreign organization. That much is obvious. He was a Ukrainian. What kind of a Ukrainian? His father says a patriotic Ukrainian who does not speak Russian. That makes him a Western Ukrainian. That makes him a supporter of government of President Zelensky that Prime Minister Kier Starmer is the world's foremost advocate for. Would not, on the face of it, only on the face of it, seem likely that this attack on Kier Starmer's property, his private property, had anything to do with disappointment in Kier Starmer's political attitude to the Ukraine. But we need to know that. We need to be sure that this person setting these fires in the Prime Minister's properties was not acting for another state, was not acting for another foreign power. And he could have been, for all that we now know. He could have been acting for the Russians. He could have been acting for the Israelis. He could have been acting for Ouagadougou. He could have been acting for organized crime. We don't know, and that is the point. This is a matter of heightened public interest. Just because all the reporters in Fleet Street have put down their pens and written nothing about this does not make it other than a matter of the highest public interest. Just
Well said, George. And if you've just joined us, we've got Craig Houston, who broke this story onto YouTube. He had the balls to put it out there when nobody else had. And I'm still seeing an absence. I expected it to blow up today when I got on my phone, searched it, and only George Galloway, as far as I'm aware, with a sizable following on YouTube, is the person who's spoke about this. Have you noticed any other more followed people reporting on this, Craig?
Not really. And I don't know why. I think last summer might have helped get to the situation. But you said, I'm brave or I've got a set of balls or something. It's either that or probable stupidity in reporting this, because there was so many people arrested. A good pal of mine, Silver Fox, he was arrested a few months ago over something he put out in his YouTube channel. So I think this is a byproduct of previous actions by the government that people are probably scared to say anything about it. Whereas I like to think I've got a good, sensible understanding of what you can and can't say. And I always obviously try to remain at the right side of the law for my own protection. And so that's probably why there's probably a lot of people would like to say things about it, but are a bit scared to, in case they end up the next statistic in a two-tiered judiciary system that we evidently have.
Indeed, it's an absolute minefield out there with the algorithmic strangulation. I've lost my channel twice when we were covering the Epstein story, and we're still, even with Trump getting in, we're still treading on eggshells, having to change certain words because if they hit a threshold on the algorithm, then there's going to be trouble. We recently had on the channel an ex-Royal Marine who went to prison for a Facebook post, and he might be a good one that you'd be interested in on your channel, because I see you posting, stuff from that genre. Yeah. But all right, I'll keep going with Galloway. Let's see what he says next.
Just because the mainstream television has not broadcast any of these questions does not make it other than a matter of the highest public interest. And of course, if our Prime Minister has left himself open to blackmail, well, arguably, we need to know that even more. Because if any minister, Kier Starmer or any Prime Minister, has left himself open to blackmail, that means our country and its interests are open to blackmail. How could we know that a particular course of policy, either domestic or foreign, had not been influenced by a prime ministerial vulnerability to blackmail? So I think the country needs to be told. And on the face of it, we have a mystery here that simply must be addressed.
Craig, based on your research then, how prolific do you think the people at the top have been compromised?
Potentially massively, and this may be why we're not hearing a lot about it. And as George alludes to, if the security of our country's been compromised by potentially the Prime Minister's actions as Prime Minister or previous to becoming Prime Minister, then that is a real big concern. This story is massive. Either way, whether it's a state-funded action against our Prime Minister or something from his personal private past, either way, the implications are huge. And it beggars belief. I really don't know, unless there's some super injunctions that have been put out, and that's possibly why some are not wanting to talk about it. But it beggars belief that this big case, such a dangerous thing, is practically all we're getting is the basic little bits of bread put out. There's no feast at the back of it, and I find that most peculiar.
Indeed. And let's do a quick poll of the viewers then. Viewers, please put a 1 in the chat if you think this arsonist is involved in an alleged lover's spat. Put a 2 in the chat if you think the suspect is some kind of honey trap, intelligence, compromising politician situation. Put a 3 in the chat if you think there is nothing suspicious here. Kier Starmer's properties have been targeted for matters completely unrelated to 1 or 2. Looks like we've got lots of 1s coming in. Lots of 1s. Most people are going for the spat. A few 2s. And also, if you've not yet subscribed to Craig's channel, I'm putting the link in the live chat. The link is also at the top of the description if you're watching this on replay, as is a link to his X. So you can watch him over there. Let's get a bit more Galloway. I think he's finished this soon.
How did a 21-year-old Ukrainian male model know the address of properties owned by Kier Starmer in the 1990s? How did he know the identity of a motor vehicle which has not been owned by Kier Starmer for some years? These are vitally important questions. And millions of people who have responded to me on social media demonstrate amply that these are matters of public interest
and national security.
And so, who's going to answer them? I call on the Prime Minister to make clear if he knows or has ever met the individuals who have been arrested for alleged arson attacks on his property. I want to know if the Prime Minister knows them. I want to know what the Prime Minister knows and when he knew it. I don't want to be the George Whig in this picture. And George Whig had parliamentary privilege and used it ruthlessly to get to the truth of the Profumo affair in the early 1960s. I have no parliamentary privilege, but I do have a voice that is heard. And so I'm asking on behalf of, I believe, a substantial section of the British public and the international community at that. Did Kier Starmer ever meet the 21-year-old male model now under arrest and charged with arson attacks against his property, current and former? Now, I mentioned a significant new fact that emerged last evening, which is that a second man, this time not 21, but 26, a 26-year-old man was arrested by police at Luton Airport, where he or she, or however they identify, was seeking to board a plane. We have no idea of the identity of that 26-year-old man, even though it caused quite a kerfuffle at Luton Airport when they were arrested. We deserve to know. It would be significant to know. For example, if the person arrested, the 26-year-old man, if he was a Ukrainian. It would be important to know if he was a male model. It would be important to know if he was in any way connected to organized crime. It would be important to know if he was seeking to fly, I don't know, to Russia or to Israel or some other place. It's normal in Britain for the basic identity of people arrested in a high-profile swoop on one of Britain's great airports. It would be normal for basic biographical details to be released.
And do you think by not releasing those details, they're just making the whole thing even more suspicious, Craig?
Yeah, as I said earlier, you know, the public right now, and have done for probably a decade and a half, we require instant information, and that's a byproduct of social media. We expect it, but you know, regardless of whether it's a football story, or this a thing like this, national security, and when there is a real vacuum and void, then that void will get filled by people suggestion thing. And people went to jail in the summer for putting, you know, filling in the gaps of the Rudy Cabana case, and some of them were actually spot on. So it's a strange world we live in. And the thing that worries me, Shaun, I'm a relatively small YouTube channel with relatively short time in this game. But I think I would be better at advising people in their PR and how to control information than the people that are running our country. And some of the things that they do, particularly in Scotland, I do a lot of stuff about Scottish Government, SNP, who are particularly bad. And you just scratch your head. You think, how stupid can you be? I think we give these people more credence than they're actually due. And these people must know more about how the public think, you know, with voice and social media than you and I. Yet seem to make mistakes time and time again. It really is pretty pathetic.
Yeah, it echoes, you know, our research into Savile and, you know, members of Thatcher's cabinet, going back to Ted Heath even, Cyril Smith. You know, it's all rather obvious now how compromised so many of those top political figures were. And this network that we believe Savile was procuring for and supplying to still exists to this day. And occasionally something bizarre will happen and the network will reveal itself.
Yeah,
For example,
sorry, there was a thought crossed my mind last night. The two occupations that are probably most likely statistically to get up to strange things in bedrooms are politicians and lawyers, or people in the legal industry. Imagine being both. You must be the most likely person in the history of the world to be up to some strange things if you are a politician and or a lawyer. So to be both kind of blows the whole thing. But on George, there's two things I like about George. There's loads of things I don't, right? But that's human nature. We don't agree on everything. The only two things I really like about George is, one, he stood up at the referendum and was very outspoken about protecting the union, and I'm a unionist, so I kind of like that. And the other thing is a new thing which I quite like, and that's the way he pronounces Ukrainians. Either George is just inventing words, or I've been saying Ukrainians incorrectly for my whole adult life.
Well, going back to Starmer then, his behavior is extremely inappropriate in many areas of life. And we've interviewed several survivors of grooming gangs on this channel, heard absolute horror stories of what these young women went through, teenagers when it happened to them, just kids. And yet he voted against the investigation into the grooming gangs back in January, thus enabling this criminal apparatus. I mean, one of the girls that we interviewed, they were transporting her. The orders were coming from the prison system. They were continuing to run the operation from the prison system. And the groomers got slaps on the wrist. They come out, go back to their families who accept them, because they just look down on these white teenage girls with mini skirts on who are getting drunk as if they deserve it. As if they deserve it. So Kier Starmer loves these people. He's enabling these people. He's protecting these people. You know, we had Raja Mir on, who said it's all about the votes. Doesn't want to disrupt race relations in these communities. Keep the votes flowing. Meanwhile, enabling the R-wording of young girls in this country on an industrial scale. It's absolutely obscene. And Maggie Oliver has been a friend of the channel for over 5 years, who broke a lot of this. She said to us that whatever party gets in control, the other parties just pick on them and weaponize them for not doing anything about it. But as soon as any of the other parties get in control, they just say the same thing. We apologize. Changes have been made. This isn't going to happen in the future, but nothing ever changes.
No, the only thing that changes is the colour of the rosette, Shaun. That seems to be the most disappointing thing for me.
It's obscene that this is being allowed to happen to so many girls, and these politicians are not standing up. I mean, you think the justice system would be to protect the kids and the women?
Well,
it's not.
There's a bit of a strange fact about my life. I am a massive Rangers fan, and that 10 years ago, I was quite publicly campaigning to move on an old board that were controlling Rangers at the time, and that campaign lasted about 3 years and was ultimately successful. But quite an unusual thing about me is when I was a child, I played football for Celtic Boys Club. The Celtic Boys Club, most people north of the border will be well aware of this, are currently going through a class action lawsuit because of the amount of, there's 9, I think, different individuals from the Boys Club who have been found guilty in a court of law for sexually abusing young boys. And I was there. I was in the middle of it, and thank God, just touch wood, that I was safe from it. But when you grow up and these stories start coming out and you think back, you think of the situations, I was just lucky. That was all. So I've got a particular concern about the safety of children. So it's a thing that's close to my heart. And I've been a youth football coach as a volunteer for 16 years, and I started my own club about 9 years ago. And the things that are in place to safeguard kids are still not good enough. We use the Scottish Football Association's child protection guidelines as a minimum and a starting point for our club. And if we see we want to raise the bar on any particular thing, then I'll do so. And I think the amount of people that have protected paedophiles through all different things, the grooming gangs, through sport, through boys' brigades, through childcare settings across the nation, is absolutely despicable. I'm trying to get into Holyrood in 2026 as an MSP, and I'll make it one of the things that I would do, not to win votes, because I think it's the right thing to do, is uncover as much of this as possible and hold them accountable. Anybody who'd done these things or protected these people, they need publicly outed, and then society will decide for itself what it does with them after that. But it's a thing that sickens me because of my close connections and just a lucky boy that I wasn't a victim myself. But I do know people that half the team that I played in were abused. So it's a topic that is very close to my heart, and something that society just needs to out every single last person that was either involved or covered it up, and that is regardless of their religion or their skin colour or their nationality, because yet there are certain demographics in certain cases, and it's massive tens or hundreds of thousands we're talking about here. And there's a friend of mine, a guy called Alex Kearney, he runs Spartan Child Protection Group. They do these paedophile hunter things and things like that. And you just spend 10 minutes with this guy, and you think you've got an idea of how bad it is, and you don't. As a normal person, we don't, and it's sickening. And we're sort of dragging the conversation away from topics. So I do apologise, but
no, take your time. You're fine. You're fine.
It's just a horrible aspect of British life that so many people in our establishment, and that will be politicians, civil servants, judges, lawyers, etc., 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 who have this fascination for. I'm trying to watch the words that I use. I don't want to get your video pulled, but PDF is a sort of safe way of saying it. It's just outrageous, and the covering up and the protecting of each other. They all need outed, even if you were not part of it. By not pursuing them, you are actually part of it. My rant is over. I beg your pardon.
No, well said, Craig. I've got a 1.5-year-old baby here, baby Ziggy, and it's horrifying for me and my partner. We interview so many survivors, and they seem to be especially embedded the higher up you go into society. For some reason, the elites have a particular propensity for these things, whether it's no empathy, psychopaths, reptilian consciousness, whatever it is. It just seems to be the way society is structured, and the legal system. When they do get reported, the chances of them getting sent down are minimal, and when they do get sentenced, the sentences are just absolutely pathetic, especially with the Catholic priest.
Yeah. Listen, it just reminded me there of a video I done 2 or 3 days ago. It was Generic the Tory that highlighted it, and I'd done a video on it. The case it was a historical case involving a lot of Pakistani men, but 3 of them went to court at the same time. 2 of them, when it came to court, had absconded, and the theory was they'd went abroad. So when he was handing down the sentences, this Muslim judge said that the only one that was there that was to face the music got a lower sentence for drugging and sexually abusing a then 13-year-old girl. He reduced his sentence to 6.5 years based on, amongst other things, that he is now involved in his local mosque. And you think, what? No, the guy drugged and abused a 13-year-old girl twice. What you've done after that, really, you're not a better person. You're still that person. You might just hang about in different places. And somebody said to me, well, that guy should never stand in a judge on a trial with another Muslim. And I said, no, stop a minute. He's shown a sectarian way of thinking. So what it is, if you're not a Muslim, you're going to get a higher sentence. So it's not only that he shouldn't be taking cases that are, trying Muslim people. He shouldn't be taking cases at all, because he's already shown that he hands out his justice unfairly. And that's the type of society, unfortunately, we've developed in the United Kingdom. And not that long ago, Shaun, I believed that Britain was a great place. And when you heard about all this cover-ups and sleaze and debauchery and bribes and backhanders, that it was alien to us. That was other countries. But I was wrong, and unfortunately, widely wrong. Whereas bad, and we've got a load of people up in Scotland who think getting an independent Scotland would answer all these ills, because they actually believe that corruption and all this stuff stops the minute you get to Gretna Green, and anything north of that is a world of paradise, completely ignoring the fact that the only political party of any size to be subject to a full investigation at their corruption was the Scottish National Party. So it's a whole British thing. It's not just Westminster. It's not just England. It's horrible, and that unfortunately is the society we live in. It's a disgrace.
And you touched earlier on the Southport stabber, and my friend Andrew Gold has done some excellent work on Kier Starmer's involvement with the parents of the stabber. And have you looked into that side of things?
And something that, you see, I said about 2 days in, when we were saying it's not terror linked, I'd done a video and got slaughtered for it. And I said, well, hold on a minute. The chief of police in the Merseyside Police has just had a press conference and thanked the anti-terror police for their support up until now and their continued help in investigation. And I was like, well, hold on a minute. You've been telling us for 2 days there's no terror link. The anti-terror folk would have turned up and took one look at it and said, no terror here, and went back to what they're good at, looking for terrorists. So I've lost my train of thought now. So, you know, we kind of, again, it's just talking nonsense and doing it right in front of our faces and us wanting to accept it. We need to just be more open-minded on it. I forgot what your question was, Shaun. I get distracted there again.
Yeah. We were talking about the Southport situation, and Kier went up to Southport.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I remember you were asking about the connections between the parents. I've got a sort of contrary understanding of this, which will probably not be the same as your friends. When I dug into this, there was a claim made that Kier Starmer somehow allowed them to come into the country, and there was some connection to an uncle who's still in the government. But at that time, the people who were carrying out the slaughtering and the genocide, let's call them the baddies. And the suggestion was Rudy Cabana's dad was one of the baddies, and Kier Starmer protected him and helped him get to the UK. Well, if the uncle is still in is actually a government minister right now, there's been an overthrown government. So we have the goodies in now. And these parties in Africa tend to be very tribal. So you would imagine if you were in one party, all your family would be connected to that party because it's very tribal, and the genocide was tribal. So that sort of contradicts this narrative that's been pushed that he protected them and Rudy Cabana's father committed genocide, because Rudy Cabana's uncle is in government just now in the party that wasn't committing genocide. So I might be wrong with that one, but that's kind of where my investigations ended up on that one.
It's just bizarre that he's even linked to them in the first place, just as it's equally bizarre that his properties are getting attacked by this kid on the screen.
Yeah.
And, you've done research into DI and unfettered immigration and things like that on your channel. What's your present viewpoints on those?
DAI is the biggest con, possibly second to the strive for net zero, in my opinion. If we are in a society that unfairly rewards certain demographics of jobs, then that's easy sorted. And every big business has an HR department. Every part of the government has got HR departments. We don't need another department to do something that an HR department could do, which is simply have a look at the demographic of employees and make sure it kind of reflects society. But I would rather be that people were given jobs on the best person for the job. So by creating a DEI, you're actually creating racism and sectarianism in itself, because you're actually now saying, well, it doesn't really matter how good you are for the job. You were going to, or sex or gender, these things all get taken into account with DEI. And it's just a farce. And like most things, like I've got my opinions on immigration is so high because immigration is now an industry and DEI is now an industry. And when you have an industry and it creates millionaires and billionaires, people are very reluctant to stop those industries. And I believe that's why we have got 28 years of government who have took power by claiming that they're going to reduce immigration, and none of them's done it. Now, I don't believe that they don't want to. I believe that they can't, and they're not allowed to. Because if we consider that nobody who's profited out of immigration, whether it be a hotelier, people, counselling, people clothing these people giving, when they come out the hotels, they get flats fully furnished. So there's businesses that only deal with furnishing immigrant houses, which is bonkers. We've got lawyers and legal companies who only deal in protecting asylum seekers. So we've got a full industry now. And if we're going to consider that nobody who's made a single penny out of these doesn't donate money to a person or a party, then we're completely naive. And that's why I believe these industries still exist, because they can't stop existing, because the amount of people making lots of money, it works its way back to the decision makers. And DEI, I believe, is no different. We've now created this whole industry. You could probably go to university and study to be a DEI specialist, for God's sake. And the whole thing just snowballs and more people make money and they don't want to stop their income. And we end up with insanity. And that's where society is just now.
Yeah, you've nailed it there. Follow the money, because I'm trying to contemplate the root causes. And I think a lot of it goes back to when Tony Blair and George Bush told the world Saddam had weapons of mass destruction. They made trillions for the likes of Dick Cheney, Halliburton, bombing the poorest countries in the world. Then they offered the locals safe refuge to our countries to become our slave worker force. And then you get all the problems of assimilation. And even when the problems kick off, everyone you put into prison, £60,000 a year to house them, Serco contract, G4S contract, hundreds of millions housing the unfettered immigrants in hotels and giving them supplies, etc. It doesn't matter what happens or what they do, they just make money from every single angle. So no wonder they don't want to change. They want the status quo.
I've spoke at 4 political rallies. 2 in Glasgow, 1 in Edinburgh, and 1 recently in Manchester. And in 3 of those occasions, I was there was counter rallies appeared, all funded by not all funded by, but a lot of funding from and support from trade unions. And this one really gets on my goat, because if you're a trade union, your single biggest issue should be protecting the British worker, the people already here in jobs. So why would a trade union scream, refugees welcome here, open it up, bring in more immigrants in? When you do that, it's going to have one effect on the wage of the current worker, because there's more people to do the job. Then wages certainly don't go up, and in some instances they come down. And that's always bothered me as to why, what's the fascination there? And I'll guarantee you, if somebody eventually finds out, that will be money related as well, because it's kind of what drives the world.
Yeah, I'm not a Marxist, but I have read many political texts, including Das Kapital, and he documents, the classic battle of the capitalists trying to get the wage down so they can make more money. And by overwhelming the country with a supply of foreign labor, they're crushing the local wage and making themselves billions in the process of doing this.
And we're getting this detail, but the one other thing that really hit home to me when I figured this one out, somebody put a stat in front of me that if we had instant remigration of people who are here illegally, not asylum seekers that are genuinely here, because they're life in danger, or here because they are great scientists and immigrants in that way, but every single illegal immigrant would be like millions gone, right? And apparently there would be 250,000 vacant properties in London alone. Now, you imagine what would happen to the value of all the properties if suddenly you had 250,000 empty ones. It's not going to go north, it's going to go south. And then you consider, well, who would lose out there? Well, it would be the people that own all the properties and people who have massive portfolios of property. You bet your bottom dollar, they don't want that. And that's why even Reform you would think would be the one party that would want to be remigrating everybody. But Nigel Farage has already been in record and saying we're not going to deport anybody. We'll try and stop the ones coming. That's what we kind of want to do. But we're not going to deport the ones that are already here. And you think, well, have you been nobbled now? Because it makes sense. Scotland has got a national housing crisis. The government told us that last year. The UK as a whole probably not far behind. Yet we've got the Scottish government demanding that they look after immigration for Scotland because they want it to be even easier to come here. You think, well, 6 months ago you told us we've no houses. And if the more pressure you put on houses, guess what? The value goes up, like any commodity. And again, you go, well, it's just down to pounds, shillings and pence. And when you factor all these things in, is it any wonder that we've had 28 years of governments tell us they're going to bring down migration and do bugger all about it? I'm trying to figure out what that's got to do with Kier Starmer and petrol bombing, but we've digressed a bit, Shaun.
Folks, if you've got any final questions for Craig about Kier Starmer and the alleged male escort who has allegedly attacked several of Starmer's properties, please put them in the chat. But you're quite right, the increased pressure on housing prices by keeping all these people in the country keeps the landlords wealthy, the elites wealthy, the
Mhm.
banking interests wealthy, and it prevents our young people who are already saddled in debt from university from leaving their parents' homes. It's absolutely obscene. The whole system is designed so that the wealthy just keep getting richer and squeezing the life out of the rest of us with all kinds of taxes and nonsense. And what can people look forward to on your channel in the coming days?
What am I working on? I've just put out one just as we were starting this video. Is Starmer throwing the fishermen under the bus now and giving the EU access to our fishing areas for another 12 years? And in return, it seems we've got two things. We might be able to get go in the EU queue when we go abroad at passport control, which and what will save us 15 minutes in our holiday. And the way they've worded it's fantastic. They were trying to allow the young people easier movement round about Europe. And the EU have said they will investigate that or they will research that. So what we've gave them is a concrete, there you go, you can come and fish here for another 12 years. But what we're getting back are sort of maybes and possibles. So I've got that. I've just put out a video, an hour's video on with an interview with a lady who is a real victim of a judiciary system up here with corruption and all this nonsense, who is basically her and her partner both bankrupted purely through the greed of other individuals. And it certainly looks as if corruption within even our judiciary system in Scotland, which is a horrific thing to admit as a Scottish person. I've got another guy who's trying to be debarred because he is a Jewish person who stands up for himself, and he's been told to try to take his ability to work as a lawyer off him, and that case has been heard on Wednesday. I'll have him on the programme short after, and then just the usual 10-minute moans I do, which are very current. So whatever comes up in the news today, I tend to do a quick 10-minute reaction to that. So, but listen, thanks very much for allowing me your platform, Shaun. I've been an admirer of your channel for a while.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for coming on. You got a few questions come in. Anna wants to know,
okay,
who do you think is lined up allegedly to replace Starmer?
I have no idea, but I hope it's no his foreign secretary. In fact, there's nobody in the cabinet. This is the thing, right? When you look at the cabinet of the United Kingdom government, who's there? Every single one of them is absolutely crackers. Do you know what I mean? We've got a foreign secretary that thinks Henry VIII came before Henry VII, right? The man's insane. So I don't know. I mean, you'd as well just no having a prime minister than any of the candidates that's there. I certainly can't see anybody in the cabinet that would be. You would think, oh, that's good. That'd make a good prime minister. There's nobody there. I mean, you consider we're only trying to find 650 people to fill Westminster and 130 to fill Holyrood. Yet there's not that many sensible people out that 700 or 800 people. It's a kind of bad state of affairs for the nation of United Kingdom that's the best we can do. And if that's the best we could do, we're in the worst place than I thought.
Sadly, Anna, it seems that only the psychopaths and people who are compromised are allowed to rise to the top, and they are expendable. So periodically, we get to throw our rotten apples and carrots and turnips at one of them and rejoice. But then another one is just brought in to continue the exact same agenda, which is quite a bleak outlook, but nevertheless. Wendy wants to know, is Starmer a loose cannon and is Britain in crisis?
I think he tries not to be a loose cannon. I think this case, whenever we find out the reality of it, will give us a better barometer than that. But you know, this is something I learned with my previous campaign I touched on with the Rangers Football Club thing, Shaun. See, when these people are in power, often their downfall is their success. Because what they think is, they think they're better than they are, and they believe that they're invincible, and they'll never get caught. And that kind of leads to their downfall in many ways. And I think Starmer's probably, I mean, let's face it, forgetting the turnout, Labour did really swing the seats in at Westminster from one direction to another. And I remember commenting on it the next day when the results were verified. And I said, isn't it bizarre that we've had a massive political swing in our country where people were evidently are really unhappy with a sitting government, yet our streets and our capitals are not full of people celebrating here? Now, if that had happened in any other country, in any other Western country, where you had such a swing from right to left and from one party to another, people would be taken to the streets with flags and banners. There was nothing. All we knew we were just getting a bad government. And the hope, I think, of the country was they'll be slightly better and not as bad as the last one. So they were going to fail from day one. They're terrible. But I think they would believe their own hype. They will think, wow, we've got so much of a majority in Westminster now that we can basically do what we want. We're invincible. We're unbeatable. And that tends to lead to doing stupid things, making mistakes, and inevitably your downfall. And I hope that happens, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well said. Katz, how can we direct youth to more positive activism and sway them away from the all that glitters isn't gold?
Well, I've been working with young people for 16 years as a volunteer football coach, and I think we don't give them the credit that they're due. There are a lot of crackpots. There's a lot of dafties out there that are kids, right? But there was dafties there when I was kids. But there are a lot of good, intelligent ones. And what we need to do is we need to talk to them, and we need to educate them, and we need to, give them their standards back and teach them wrong from right. And it's not acceptable to be walking about the streets with knives. The knife crime in this country is ridiculous, with another kid, 15 or 16-year-old, murdered on a beach in Scotland in a beautiful little town called Troon just 24, 48 hours ago. And as it turns out, I've got a connection. I'm not a best friend or anything, but a connection to the poor boy's grandfather. And the knife crime's ridiculous. So we need to educate our people better. And if that's not going to happen overnight with the educators that we've got, then us as adults, we need to take responsibility for that. And we all are in contact with young people through whatever means. And we just need to educate them a bit and give them morals and give them guidance and give them something to aim for and drive for. Scotland, about 20 to 25% of Scottish young adults have never contributed to income tax or NI because they don't work. We kind of need to change that. We need to inspire them to get up off their ass. We don't have a skill shortage in Scotland. That means we need to bring people into Scotland to fill jobs. We have a get up off your ass problem in Scotland where not enough people are doing that. So, that's something that we could do to help. And if kids have got a future and they've got, an idea that they can maybe get on the property ladder and get up off their ass and do stuff, then, they will by default be better directed. And I think we owe it to our younger generation. You've already said you've got an 18-month-old in your family now, and congratulations there, Shaun. And we all want to make it a bit better for them. So we need to give them positive goals to achieve. And you can't really blame them if they think, well, I'm never going to own a property. Scottish government give me everything free if I don't work. Well, what's the point? We don't infuse them. We need to do that. I'm a great believer in that. And hopefully the next generation can make a better game of it than we are.
Craig, we salute you for your authenticity. Thank you for spending so much time with us. Craig's channel link is in the description box. It's in the live chat. I've just put it in. It's also going to be in the pinned comment. So people, please go and sub to Craig. He's, one of the ones who was at the forefront of this story we've been reporting on about Kier Starmer and the male escort, whereas the mainstream media are all in lockstep. We're not hearing a single peep out of them, which just adds to our suspiciousness that something untoward has actually happened here. So if there's anything you'd like to say in conclusion, Craig, before we let you go.
Thanks for giving me a platform, Shaun, and I've no doubt I'll get some extra views and subscribers because your channel's massive in comparison to mine. I saw your own personal story. I saw that on a podcast many months ago, and hat off to you for becoming the person you have after having so much against you and what you've done. So yeah, well done, mate, and all the best to you. And as I always say at the end of all my podcasts, have a great day. Cheery, bye now.
Thanks, Greg. And if there's anything we can do for you, you just let us know. All right. Cheers, my friend. Take care. Thanks. Bye. What a phenomenal guest, folks. I thought we were just going to be on for about 20 minutes and to cover the story, but you know, the amount of different things that Craig is covering right now really dovetails with our own mission on this channel. And I would love to do more collaborations with him in the future. So we had Juliet Bryant premiere in this morning, Epstein Survivor. If you missed it, it was a 90 minutes long podcast. We've got Gloria Masters back for part 2 tonight. Phenomenal guest, Survivor at 8 p.m. And then tomorrow we've got Rachel, 8 p.m., Survivor of Mum's Boyfriend at age 10. And then on the 24th, we've got Seth, who was recently on Soft White Underbelly, childhood survivor. We possibly got Epstein's niece coming on, Anya Wick. That one is still pending, but loads of content coming up. I think Ron's going to be covering more Diddy trial stuff today. So hope to see some of you in some of our next streams. So much love and respect wherever you are in the world. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for subscribing to Craig. Send him some love from here when you go over there, and maybe that will incentivize him to come back.